Hello and welcome back to Chart Pattern Trading Masterclass by Wealthy Education. In this video, we'll take a look at something called the rounded bottom. And this is a pattern that takes time to develop. It's very much like the cup with handle. And in fact, you can somewhat use it interchangeably. It just comes down to uh, whether or not you get the handle. So like in this example here, this is Axis Bank. You can see cup with handle, but without the handle, it's a rounded bottom. Now, depending on when you get involved, you may have a situation where at this point, it's a rounded bottom. Basically, like I said, it's just the teacup without the handle. You could make that argument. The measured move is the height of the pattern, which clearly you got. That wouldn't have been an issue either. You can use some indicators to see, are we seeing a change in momentum? And I would say yes, especially once you get to here. We've broken the zero pattern. We dip back down here during what could be the handle. But once we broke out above the top of the bigger rounded bottom, we had a spread. We had broken back above the zero line here on the MACD. So let's take a look at, let's do another stock real quick. So what you want to see is the more time spent, the better. So for example, you could make an argument for a very choppy rounded bottom there. I don't like that as much, but just because it's so back and forth. But you could make an argument for a bit of a rounded bottom here, or you can extend it out to here. Either way, you would be looking for it to break this area. So let's just say you decide that's a rounded bottom, and there is a bit of artistry involved in this. Well, once you clear that area, you gap on earnings and you just take off. You get the range with absolutely no issues here in Alibaba. This is a pattern that you will see in a lot of stocks more than anything else. But you do see it in other types of markets as well. So let me take a look at Target. Yeah, so here's a rounded bottom as well. It is choppy along the way, but one way, if you have questions about it, what is it? Well, pull up a line chart. Notice how it really is a rounded bottom. So again, you could try the RSI, but by the very nature that it moves so slowly, you very rarely get a signal on the RSI, because the RSI is going to, think about it's about momentum. It's about overbought, oversold. Well, if it's taking its time getting down there, it's not really an oversold condition. It's just that buyers are starting to come back in. Now, one indicator that can be important, volume, at least in the stock market. You can see that we got a spike here and that kind of kicked off. And once we broke out over here, we spiked again. So pay attention to volume on the exit. You also, of course, would have, the usual suspects here when it comes to technical analysis. There's your 50-day EMA. We break above there, we use it as support, and we continue. So let's take a look at Forex. I don't know, let's just do Euro Yen. So you could make an argument for a rounded bottom there. We actually pulled back to it and rallied right around the 120 level. So that is technically a rounded bottom. It pulled back and retested. Could just be a breakout. And again, don't get too hung up on the specific, whether it perfectly fits the pattern or not, because the reality is, if there are a group of people out there that think that it is one thing that's bullish, and there are a group of people out there that think that it's another thing that's bullish, well, it's going to be bullish. It really doesn't matter what name you apply to it. So here's a rounded bottom here. But again, you could also say cup with handle. Really doesn't matter. you would put your stop loss under this cluster here once it broke this level, and you can see clearly the dollar rallied against the Canadian dollar. MACD did cross the zero line there and then really started to take off on the breakout. So pretty straightforward setup there. Let's go ahead and take a look at, let's do a crypto here. Let's do Litecoin. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Litecoin rounded bottom, noisy, but it did get its target. Now, this is where you need to decide, do you want to put your stop loss back here? Or on the breakout, do you want to put it halfway? Because if you put it halfway, you may have gotten tagged there. Hard to tell, really. The volatility profile of the cryptocurrency markets do make these things happen. Are we in the midst of another rounding bottom now? Well, no, as I record this, because we are seeing so much volatility. The key to a rounded bottom is you want a lack of volatility, not an increase in it. So that's why sometimes these patterns, although they look like they could be, I don't know that I would call them a rounding bottom. A rounding bottom is a gradual shift in the entire thinking of the market. We are gradually turning our attitude to a longer term, more sustainable bullish rally. So that ends module 2. We'll take a look in module 3 at the most bearish chart patterns.